while you're clapping, I'm talking about you.
This is my convention. What is happening to it?
Defending against the modern-day downgrade as we head downhill at breakneck speed. Speaking truth, exposing the lies. This is Polemics Reports.
You know why you do it. You don't do it because you get paid well. You don't do it because men love you. You do it because you love men, and because more than that, you want to honor God.
From a location somewhere in the eastern Montana prairie, this is your host, J.D. Hall.
Hello, you are listening to, or I should say, maybe you are on live with this edition of the Polemics Report for May 3rd, 2022. I'm kind of wondering if I'm going to have to change that intro that says J.D. Hall for the times that J.D. is not here. He is still, Teresa, he is still out and about. He is not home yet, but he is very much enjoying a little bit of rest and relaxation. Those of you that might follow him on Facebook, you've seen a picture of him with a goat, which, like, I'm not JD, obviously, so he's got other interests that I have, but I'm glad that you're joining me tonight for this edition of the Polemics Report. Polemics Report, of course, is, as you may know, we like to talk about current issues in evangelicalism, current issues, and really discern and work through things. And tonight we're going to be talking about kind of an interesting series of events for me. They're so interesting, in fact, that I had to change thanks, Teresa. I had to change the title of the live stream on YouTube to sort of change the topic a little bit. It's not going to change a whole lot. We'll get into it a little bit. But if you are a lovable freeloader, and I always like to talk about the lovable freeloaders, if you are enjoying this program, or this you get benefit out of this, or you feel led to financially support this ministry, you can do so at patreon.com/pulpit and pen for $5.95 a month. You can become a non-freeloader, like me, a non-freeloader. And if you're so inclined to give more for $19.95 a month, you can join us on Tuesday nights. We just finished the Bulldogmatic Bible study. That is a time that we spend on Zoom together, fellowshipping and studying the Word. And right now we're in 2 Corinthians. And so that's always a blessing to get to do that before coming to the podcast. Now it's been the last the last couple of weeks I've been going live like Tuesday and Thursday night. It seems to be that folks like that, like the active hanging out and being able to talk back and forth and ask questions, and have me respond as y'all are in the chat and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, so you can support this ministry that way. There are all sorts of levels to do that. One of the other things you get if you support the ministry is you get subscribed to the Insurgency email list. So if you're kind of a news junkie like me, or you want to stay apprised of what's going on out there in the world, but don't want to have to jump all over the internet or miss out on things that mainstream media and mainstream websites like to censor, the Insurgency email list is for you. And all you have to do is you subscribe to Patreon, send an email to Cheyenne@GideonKnox.com, and she will add you to the Insurgency. And I get at least 2 Insurgency emails. I'd have to double check that frequency. I don't want to tell you something that's not accurate, but suffice it to say, it's very helpful to get those links sent direct. You also get Protestia ad-free that shows up as kind of a newsletter in your email as well. If you're not a big fan, I get complaints from time to time about how many ads there are on Protestia.com. It is what it is. But anyway, so tonight we are going to be talking about what's going on with the Supreme Court, as well as some evangelical responses to what's going on because of what has leaked out of the Supreme Court. We're going to be discussing that. We're also going to be talking about, as you may have been aware if you saw my op-ed on Protestia today, we're going to talk about me almost getting conned by a supposed abuse survivor. And to this moment, I have no idea if the person who tried to con me is an actual abuse survivor or not. It's really not that important. I think that the story will be interesting to be kind of a warning to all of us. And certainly, especially, to me, since I was almost the one that got hosed, that got conned. And I want to fill in a little bit about just a little interaction that I had with Julie Roys over this in response to what I told her. We will get to that as well. And then also there are some patron questions, but we won't get to those till the second stream. After we bid the freeloaders adieu, we will get to the patron stream and answer some of those questions. Now, before we get to all that, of course, the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is always at the beginning of the program, and something where if you are not a believer will be the best news that you have ever heard. You place your faith and your trust in Jesus Christ to save you. The gospel will be the good news of salvation to reconcile you to the Father. That the gospel is this, that while you and I were born into sin and hopelessly incapable of actually reconciling ourselves to God, having a true relationship with him, lost and dead in our sins, God loved the world so much he sent his only son, Jesus Christ, to be born of a virgin and live a perfect life we couldn't live, die a death on the cross that we deserved and should have died, to pay that penalty to God the Father and redeem us, a people for himself. That's the good news of the gospel. And if you place your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, salvation can be yours. That is a biblical promise. Jesus died on that cross and on the third day was raised again by the power of the Holy Spirit, proving that his sacrifice was accepted and conquering death, proving his sacrifice was accepted, conquering death. And Jesus now sits at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us. That's just the best news. For those of you that are saved, for those of you that have placed your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, it is our reminder to you that you need to be part of a local biblical New Testament church. That is a step of obedience for all Christians. Join a church, be a loving, giving, serving, participatory member of your local church, because that is what the Bible and the Word of God, that is, tells you to do. And our subject tonight, Julie Roys, is not part of a local New Testament church, which makes something like the situation that we're going to talk about later a little bit more difficult, honestly, because while Julie Roys could point out perhaps that I got out over my skis a little bit with what we promised, a couple different things. I'm still going to give you some new information because I promised to give you new information. That being the case, I want to be entirely transparent and tell you it's not the information I thought it was going to be. So we did talk about, and I'll go through this a little bit, but I want to give you new information because that's what I promised to do, and really recap some things, because Julie, my brief interaction with her, which may be the last interaction I have with her, I have no idea, was basically her demanding that I come on this video. And Julie, if you're listening, I read exactly what you said. Demanding that I come on here and apologize, and apparently be contrite for getting a little ahead of myself with what I thought was going to come to fruition in terms of evidence. Those of you that read the article, you saw it, that I was basically being lied to and conned and sold a bill of goods. And by God's good grace and by exercising, going through this and double checking and making sure, and honestly checking with Julie herself, just to double check, because we knew that what we had was fake, but just to double check and to be able to tell everybody, hey, we wanted to make sure we don't want to say things that are false. That's not the goal around here. The goal is not to get Julie Roys, not the goal. The goal is for truth to come to light, and I hope to be able to boil that stuff down and get out of all the muck and the details and talk about the doctrine, because I really believe that, and I believe I've demonstrated this, that's what motivates her. It is doctrinal, or in her case, I would argue, false doctrinal that motivates her to do what she does. But we'll get into that. First, I want to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court. And for those of you that follow any big evangelical voices or leaders or thought influencers or these kind of people, it was a sight to behold. It was a sight to behold to watch these big Eva types try to maintain their preferred anti-abortion strategy in the face of what will likely be, and it's not a guarantee, we haven't seen anything yet, but will likely be the Supreme Court throwing out the just abysmal legal decision known as Roe versus Wade. For a long time, a lot of these progressive evangelicals masquerading as conservatives would talk about, hey, I'm pro-life, I'm anti, I'm against abortion, but they would really wrap it up as something that was a lot more comprehensive than just making abortion illegal, saying, hey, God's law says thou shalt not murder, abortion is murder, therefore we should make abortion illegal. They decided they had to wrap it up in all sorts of other social welfare kind of ideas. And well, if you're pro-life, if you're against abortion, then you also have to be for more or less cradle to grave welfare state. If you're pro-life, you'll be pro all stages of life. This was generally the Karen Swallow Pryor angle on this, and she's out, and I don't know if this was today or yesterday, but out basically saying that she couldn't do the moral calculus. She couldn't do the moral calculus to figure out that voting for Donald Trump would have been the right idea because he promised to put judges on the court that would be pro-life and potentially do away with Roe versus Wade, because there might be consequences down the line for misogyny and I guess mean tweets and insurrections. She characterized January 6th as an insurrection, which is it's so dumb it defies, we don't even need to explain anymore that it wasn't an insurrection. The Congress was back to work the same night. No firearms enter the Capitol. I don't know how she could consider it that, except what I really believe, and that's that she's lost. But you have Karen Swallow Pryor. You have our favorite battle wapper, Kyle J. Howard, weighing in on this. I mean, this is I don't know if any of you have seen this yet. It's over at Protestia. Kyle J. Howard is triggered by Supreme Court ruling because white people sacrifice black people's joy and flourishing to attain it. So, and there's a bunch of Kyle J. Howard tweets linked here, and just the history of what a clown he is. We still have, by the way, our $3,500 informational bounty out for Kyle J. Howard because he lied about being a gang member. He was a member of the Quips, is what he tried to say, and I'd go down to the barber shop, they call me Wev. This is what he wants to say. And yet here he is weighing in again. I don't have any thoughts about SCOTUS to share. My view of abortion has been made clear on here in past. For a moment, I'm honestly just deeply triggered. Let me ask, is there ever a time when Kyle J. Howard is not deeply triggered? Ever a time? I don't think that there is. For the moment, I'm honestly just deeply triggered by all because white evangelicals sacrifice black and POC faith family on their social political altars for this. So yeah, exactly. Well, Standard of Truth podcast, maybe you could, and it's not that it wouldn't be if you said so, but it's not racist for me to make fun of Kyle J. Howard this way, is it? He's the one that says it's a transracial accent, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. And I don't think, Will Smith should slap him. I know, right? I don't think that it's wrong to mock somebody this way when they claim to be an underground battle rapper. And, to get back to being doctrinal about it, when you're an accuser of the brethren, that's what I take more seriously. And that's why I don't mind kind of, teasing him about it a little bit. making fun of him about him. Anyway, back to my ridiculous Kyle J. Howard accent. What's most on my mind right now is all the celebration and joy white evangelicals are experiencing right now. So it's like Kyle J. Howard's like, they're going to hopefully do away with Roe versus Wade, save millions of babies. But white people are celebrating it. So it twiggers him. I mean, any white people say this, it twiggers Kyle J. Howard. The sacrifice of black and POC people's safety and flourishing was worth it. I will forever stand and support and protect the unborn, but I also believe in moral consistency. Like, this is so idiotic. I mean, anybody that actually has looked at anybody that's actually looked at abortion and what happens, abortion is a holocaust in the black community. Abortion is a holocaust among our black brothers and sisters. It's awful. It's, for those of you that don't know, eugenics, Margaret Sanger's eugenics started as a way to reduce the population of black people. Abortion is, in this country, is a racist policy. It's always been a racist policy. And yet we have Kyle J. Howard, our racial trauma counselor, Kyle J. Howard, is over here saying how racist it is to get rid of abortion, even though this means saving millions of black babies. And, as much as I like making fun of this guy, this is just an awful, awful, sinful, lost, wicked position to have. Speaking of wicked, I almost said Wiccan, a little Freudian slip. Speaking of witches and Wiccan, Karen Swallow Prior weighed in on this as well. Karen Swallow Prior tweets out here, and the worst part is she's dunking on this. She's dunking like somehow she figured it out. So she tweets out here, I called it, abortion will be considered unthinkable 50 years from now. And then is challenged on this. In your mind, was voting for Trump worth the 3 SCOTUS justices that got us here? And like, she can't bring herself to say it. Now, I, for one, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I didn't. I wish I had, now knowing what he was able to accomplish in the 4 years that he was president, especially in terms of these SCOTUS picks. I kind of feel a little bit guilty for not getting to participate in that, honestly. I didn't vote for him in 2016, but guess what? I can admit that I was wrong. I can admit that I didn't see it. I thought maybe he was still going to be a closeted Democrat and he was kind of pulling our chain, and he largely, except for, I know what some of you are going to say, except for the COVID nonsense and Operation Warp Speed and not firing Fauci and Birx immediately. Those were big stains on his presidency, I think. But in terms of, getting justices to the Supreme Court that got us to this point, that was a great thing to do. And Karen Swallow Prior can't admit it. She can't admit it because she's not really anti-abortion. She's really a closeted Revoice supporter and animal rights supporter. And she thinks animals get personhood as soon as you give them names and all sorts of pagan nonsense this woman believes. And back to the tweet, she says, well, I didn't vote for Trump. So no, that's why I thought it would take 50 more years. And is challenged again. Do you think the expedited end to Roe versus Wade was more worth the quote unquote moral compromise? I think my first reply answers that question. Her first reply, of course, was I didn't vote for Trump. So basically, Karen Swallow Prior is sitting here saying that voting for Trump was not, like she wouldn't vote for Trump even knowing what she knows now. The Supreme Court is primed to overturn the murderous abortion policy. And then, of course, challenged again, wait a minute, is this real? Is this a real response? Are you legitimately suggesting that distancing yourself from Trump's poor character would have been worth countless millions more babies lost over another 50 years of Roe? Tell me that's not what you're saying. And Karen Swallow Prior says, I'm not good enough at math to calculate the long-term consequence of sex abuse, misogyny, Epstein, and insurrection. It's ridiculous. It's a moral calculus I can't do. Well, yeah, you know why she can't do that moral calculus? Because she's lost. Because she's blind. Because she can't understand thou shalt not murder is a law of God, a top law. Misogyny, I'm sorry, is not. You could argue that in some cases it could be sinful, but it does not come close to being thou shalt not murder babies, Karen. I love that her name's Karen, by the way. That's, I mean, like, I have friends who are Karen, so I really want to like be easy with this, but in terms of it being just a pejorative for nattering hens, like Karen Swallow, I love that that's her name. It's so anyway, so we have then, bring this up here, and this is the more Karen Swallow Prior nonsense. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the screen. I'll put it up here. So multiple responses, including the well, I don't know if misogyny is any better than baby murder or any worse than baby murder, or excuse me, her saying, I don't know if baby murder is any worse than misogyny. She claims, and I don't know if you can see it in the lower right, that she says, yep, it was for this, I was for the slow, right way of doing things. That's why I said 50 years. I'm not big on shortcuts. So to Karen Swallow Prior, simply making baby murder illegal federally, because there's still going to be wicked states like mine that have codified the quote unquote right to an abortion in state law, but making baby murder federally illegal is a shortcut to Karen Swallow Prior. This woman is wicked. Absolutely wicked. And J.D. Hall told us all about this years ago. For all of those Southern Baptists that are now pointing this out and saying, she should be fired, she's not a believer, she, this and that and the other, correctly saying this, they were the same people not long ago that were roasting J.D. Hall over saying that Karen Swallow Prior was a wicked, evil woman. I don't want to dunk on, I'm not going to bring them up by name, but you know what I'm talking about. These big evangelical types that were just, they were so generous and so concerned about charity and unity and the same types that would call clearly lost people brothers and sisters in conversations on social media. And don't get me wrong, they weren't calling those people brothers and sisters for their benefit or the person that they were addressing. They were virtue signaling for the rest of us. They were saying, like I'm willing to be so charitable with someone that calls themselves a Christian despite reams of evidence to the contrary. I'm going to be so charitable with this person, so that you'll all know that I'm a nice guy, because I don't want to take any flack. I'm not willing to be in the arena. I'm not willing to get arrows, fired at me. So yeah, so I'll call Dwight McKissick a brother, and I'll call Karen Swallow Prior a sister, and I'll call Russell Moore a brother, and all these other folks that just have provided us more evidence than we know what to do with, that they're lost, that they're unregenerate. And yet we have people giving J.D. Hall a hard time for accurately pointing this woman out. I don't need to, I mean, we've dunked enough on that. I don't need to dunk more, for the benefit of JD. You all know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so we have, so we have right now, has anybody else noticed that, like, if you go down social media right now, like all of the Ukrainian flags are starting to be replaced with like pink hats and stuff like that? It's like the cult of the next big thing is on to supposed abortion rights now. And it might be a distraction. It might be, hey, let's talk about this now. Let's leak this draft SCOTUS decision out in the open to distract people from, I don't know, Dinesh D'Souza's movie is coming out. Distract people, get people all riled up, and hopefully we can rally people around this before the midterms. Rush Limbaugh always used to say that abortion is the high sacrament of the religion of leftism. And that's true. Abortion happens to wrap up a lot of leftist goals and policies and evil all into one policy. I mean, it's selfish. It's directly against God's law. It abuses children, which is something leftists love to do. they're all going to have to now that abortion is likely going to be not federally protected anymore. They're likely going to have to move off of trying to groom kids, and get back to killing them before they're born. Rush said, abortion is the high sacrament. It wraps up a lot of leftist evil all into one big thing. And of course, I mean, we have at this point the same people who are just fine. I mean, like for the last 2 years, just fine with the federal government. They weren't able to figure out that the Constitution actually protected bodily autonomy for 2 years straight. Through the First Amendment, you have a freedom of religion, you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of association. These things obviously imply bodily autonomy. These same people are now complaining that the federal government looks at the Constitution and doesn't find the right to an abortion. Like it's totally hypocritical, totally inconsistent. And the same people saying, that men shouldn't, like you'll see this on social media. They say men shouldn't get to weigh in on this debate. If you're not a woman, and these are the same people that don't know what a woman is, of course, saying, well, if you're not a woman, you have no opinion. Of course, then if men, want to have an opinion, I guess we just need to identify as a woman and then we're good to go. I mean, they would have been better to say, hey, if you're not a birthing person, you don't have an opinion, as if that's a thing. And I can't help but notice the irony that the same people out there saying, hey, men shouldn't get to weigh in on the abortion, this issue, and shouldn't have to, they're just fine with the fact that Roe v. Wade was 9 men. And nobody's talking about that the awful legal decision known as Roe versus Wade was 9 men on the Supreme Court. Just to want to point that out there. The other thing that I'm concerned about, of course, as a result of this, and we see it now as they're putting up, I guess, fencing and things around the Supreme Court building, is the very real violence that may result from this. As all of these leftists are complaining about, consider January 6th to be this big violent insurrection and all this, like real violence is probably coming as a result of this. So I mean, we should be keeping law enforcement officers and people that may live in areas where this would happen in our prayers, that God would protect them from the evils that will likely come in the form of physical violence from the Supreme Court rightly striking down this supposed constitutional right to an abortion. Anyway, moving on. So the article that I published on Protestia this afternoon, I guess, well, depending on where you live, if you were on the West Coast, it was just before noon, but basically the article I put up today that we had kind of teased and then wound up being a totally different article than what I thought it was going to be, was very interesting. And I'll fill you in. If you haven't read the article, I'll fill you in on a few other little details about this, about what happened. So I was contacted on Twitter, basically through an like a different Twitter account, said, hey, you might want to talk to this person. You might want to talk to this person, and they have some information that you need to know about Julie Roys. Okay, fine. Honestly, at this point, I'm tired of talking about Julie Roys. I think that we've conclusively, and especially after showing her teaching that heretical theology of the body nonsense, I think we've conclusively established the fact that she's not an Orthodox Christian. We've conclusively established her technique and how she smears in her articles. I don't really want to talk about her anymore. There's other things to get onto at this point. And yet stuff kept coming in and folks are reaching out. Hey, did you know this? Did you know that? What about this? What about that? And so, okay. I said, hey, look, I'd be open to listening about this if you want, if you have something going on. And basically beginning at that point afterwards, I didn't realize until, and this is, by the way, this is the time frame of this is less than a week. Like this was like last Wednesday, this was first brought to me. But from the moment that happened, it was, and I didn't realize the time I was being played. I mean, I was being lied to this entire time. And the problem is that the best liars, they mix it in with truth. And so the first things that I'm sent the first things that I'm sent on this are verifiably true. Emails talking about being losing housing for the conference and all that. That's all true. That stuff is true. But the crux of it was, hey, I have this indication that Julie's done something bad here, and here's the emails that prove this. And upon thorough examination, they didn't look as legit as they did to begin with. I got them on a mobile phone, so it was like I didn't notice that there was some formatting, abnormalities and things like that at first. And so I start to write an article. I start to put something together with the idea that this is going, folks need to know this, that this is kind of what's going on. With the idea that, hey, this person is purporting to be an abuse survivor. They're in a bad place. They had a death in the family, these kind of things. So I want to be sensitive. I'm trying to really handle this and be entirely transparent. I think I said something like, you can screenshot anything for any conversation that we do and keep it as long as you want. I'm not going to pull the wool over your eyes. I'm not going to start to, I'm not going to try to deceive you to somehow convince you to do something you don't want to do. And beyond that, I'm going to let you, if we get kind of done with this, if we get to the end, and you don't want to go through with it, fine. We're not going to publish this stuff. I said that. That was part of the deal. Now this deal was based on the idea that you got to be transparent and open with me. If I'm going to basically give you a toggle switch on whether this goes or not, you got to be entirely honest. You can't be playing games and going back and forth and selling me falsehoods and all this kind of stuff. That's not going to happen. Along the process, I realized that stuff was being said, and lies were being told to me, that there were falsehoods going out. And, when it's somebody you don't know, especially, they may have their own motivations, may not even be the person they say they are. I mean, who knows? It's over the internet. Any indication of that is like, we need to, this can't go forward. And at one point I said that, like, this is dead to me. We're not going through with this. We're done. You're lying, and I'm not willing to subject the possibility that you're lying about everything here, because I know you're lying about some things. And the response I got back was basically, okay, fine. And yeah, it was fine, and yet still trying to say, hey, I still want to go through with this. I still want to publish this stuff. I still want this to be out there. And so we're going back and forth. And so basically I decided, okay, I'm going to call this bluff. I'm going to call this person's bluff. And I start saying, things like, people are going to get this story no matter if it's legit. Of course, this is true. If the story was legit, which I didn't, at this point, I'm highly suspicious. But if the story is true, other people are going to get a hold of this. You've sent these pictures to other people. Other people can get a hold of this, and they're going to run stories. And so it's going to be out there, but you won't be able to control the narrative. So I start saying these kinds of things, which is totally true, assuming the story is legit. I start getting back responses like, well, I'm going to contact my lawyer, and my lawyer's going to call you, and he's going to stop you from doing this, and these kind of things. So now I'm like, okay, so now you're threatening me legally. And I've been entirely transparent and honest about things going forward. I have to figure out whether this is legit or not. And so I arranged for one of these, what I was certain was a fake email. I arranged for one of these fake emails to just find its way onto the internet for about, 15, 20 minutes. With the idea that if it's legitimate, there won't be pushback. But if I'm being lied to and deceived, she's gonna freak out. And she freaked out. And calling everybody and messaging and all this. I can't believe it. My boss is going to fire me. He's yelling at me. He's getting on my case. And so at that point I knew, okay, you're definitely lying to me, because there's no way, if your boss is a state governor, that he somehow came across this random little email, this random little Twitter account tweeting out something that didn't even have your name as text. Like, yeah, that's unbelievable. So now at this point, we know that it's fake. We know that it's a scam. We know it's a con. And so we contact Julie, who says, yeah, it's fake. You know, no surprise there, just confirming. And accuses me. Julie accuses me at this point of defaming her character. Now, Julie had not called me out for quote unquote defaming her character with any of the other 5 or whatever articles that I've done about her lately. She calls me out for defaming my character by teasing this story on the last podcast. That was the problem for her. And so I'm gonna play. I actually have that video queued up. I'm gonna play what she's upset about from. I guess this would have been the April 30th when I was talking about the theology of the body stuff. I'm gonna play that for you and then kind of walk through, I guess, what she must be upset about. This podcast, we're getting to the end here, but I said at the very beginning that we have some more information coming out about Julie Roys that I'm hoping to have out to you by Monday. But suffice it to say, it's going to blow up the facade of Julie Roys as an ethical investigative journalist. We have some information about some very unethical, I would say immoral, but certainly unethical things that Julie Roys has been caught saying and doing and promoting that we're going to be we're going to be releasing this information hopefully by Monday. So stay tuned to protestia.com for that information. I want to thank you all again for. So that's what I said last week, and that's what she's really upset about. Calls that defamation. Now I want to say right now that what I thought it was, we should not have teased that in advance, because I had promises for the information and whatnot that did not come to fruition. So I want to be fully transparent and admit that that's what happened, and I'm sorry, and should not have gotten out ahead of myself with that. That being the case, I did not accuse her of anything specific. And I have about 15,000 words on the internet accusing her of all sorts of unethical things, all sorts of things that I think are bad behavior. So it's hard for me to be too sorry about making a claim of a few more unethical things with her. In response to me apologizing about this, I was, told, hey, you need to get out and apologize about this. So it would not surprise me to hear now that I have bent the knee and am somehow apologizing because I was told to apologize. I'm being entirely transparent with what happened. We were fed a bill of goods going into this, and by the grace of God and by going through the proper steps to make sure, not only did that information not come out, but I published it anyway and said this is fake nonsense. And this is, Julie Roys did not do anything wrong. And in fact, I think she did the right thing, the smart thing, by making sure that this person that was conning everybody was not part of her, not attending her conference, not staying with a friend. That was a wise thing. Ian's asking, why would somebody fabricate this? I don't know for sure. But I suspect, I don't know if that's a joke. Someone's like, I'm unsubscribing now. Oh, maybe. I don't know for sure, but my suspicion is that the person is just, they're disturbed or they're maybe ill in some way. I don't want to take guesses about that, really. My goal is not to hurt this person, even though, I think what they did was pretty bad. If they really are, damaged that way or in need of healing or need of professional help, I really hope they get it. I don't know. I don't know if it was a purposeful setup or not. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I'll just say straight, I don't have any evidence of that. It doesn't seem that way. So I mean, I don't want to take too many guesses. But it's ironic, and I think it's a little ridiculous that that Julie's really upset about me supposedly defaming her by teasing. I mean, you guys saw the clip there. For teasing something that I thought we had, and because I feel bad about teasing. I never like to be, to falsely advertise, to say, hey, we have this, and then we don't have it. So we're going to go through some things that I do have, a little bit of reminder. I'm going to go through a little bit of reminder of what we do have on Julie and what she has actually done, and sins that she's actually committed and has not repented of. We're going to go through that right now. And this is verified, documented, yet to be challenged by anybody. And I've continued to throw this out there that if I'm telling you something that isn't true, or it needs to be challenged, I'm open to challenge. Now, ironically, Julie, in her statement in regards to her book, her abusive relationship with Sarah coming to light, and everybody sort of noticing that, her response statement said something along the lines of like, I'm open to criticism and all that. No, she isn't. So that's something else she got on my case about was, well, you didn't contact me once in your articles. Well, that's because she blocked me on social media the moment I was critical. And yeah, could I have sent emails to her website and all that? Sure. But you block somebody without ever interacting, and that's kind of a sign that you don't want to be contacted, that you're not willing, you're not open to rebuke, you're not open to conversation. She could have just as easily issued some sort of a rebuttal or contacted us with some sort of a, hey, David got a bunch of the stuff wrong. That didn't happen. So I'm not going to get too worked up over her accusing me of things that she herself is guilty of, which, by the way, I don't think are wrong. I mean, she can block me all day long, and when she makes error publicly, I have every right and perhaps obligation to correct it publicly. That's all we did. I make no apologies for that whatsoever. But let's start a little bit here. And I'm going to rewind this back a little bit to the first David Gray article. And this is, by the way, this is something that Julie does in all of her articles, but she purposefully sows, I mean, she's supposedly a journalist. She purposefully sows confusion. She presents information, they would, I'm sorry, I'm like reading the chat is what this is called. Yeah. Fabricates takedown protests. Yeah, it's possible. I thought about that for sure. It seemed like, because I talked to other folks that had kind of gone through this with the same person, that there's just there are a lot of other factors here that I may not be aware of. I do know this. There was certainly, like, Julie knew, according to people I talked to, according to the folks that I had phone conversations with today, I was told that Julie knew, and of course she knew because we kind of teased it. She knew something was coming out about her. And she knew what it was. She knew what we had and what we were going to release. And she made no effort to say, hey guys, this is fake stuff. Like, she would have been just fine with us releasing a bunch of, photoshopped emails to discredit us. She would have been just fine with that. Now we figured it out, and she did admit that they were fake. I mean, she admitted immediately they were fake, which she would have known, because if they were legit, I mean, she would have known that she sent them and known she had the conversation, but she would have been just fine with us releasing a bunch of, like, being scammed like this and that'd be just fine. And you know what? That's okay. I don't blame her, for that part. It's not her job to cover for us, so that's not a very big deal, but I mean, that's a component to it. I think she would have been just fine with, and now that didn't happen, and this happened instead. I caught the liar. I put the bait out there. I caught the liar. Now that happened, and we didn't release any fake information. actually exposed it. I hope that at least in a way, maybe that's the, blunting this attack. We'll see. Anyway, but back to it. So in all of her articles, every single, well, I shouldn't say every single one. I don't want to generalize that way, but in the ones that I've worked through, this is a consistent pattern. She mixes and matches facts and events to create the most damning narrative she can, with no regard whatsoever for any of the readers actually getting a true understanding of what's going on. The readers are supposed to come up with a generalized understanding that paints her target in the worst way possible. I mean, like with the David Gray article, for weeks, if not months, there were people on social media citing her article and saying manifestly false things about what happened. Like that is such an indictment of her journalism, that somebody reads your article and can't even figure out the basics, can't even figure out the basic timeline. Says things like, the church knew that David Gray was a sexual abuser, and they still kept, and they didn't do anything about it. They kept counseling Eileen to go back to David Gray, even though they knew he was sexually abusing the kids. Like, people were saying that based off her article, a manifest untruth that they got from her article. And that was purposeful. She wanted that to happen. She crafted the article to create that kind of a confusion, because it wasn't about getting facts out there and information about there. It was about smearing John MacArthur's character. This is undeniable that this is what happened. One of the other things she does in these articles, she mixes hard facts, like a court documented event, like, hey, they went to court and this happened. She mixes that and intermingles it with claims and testimony from witnesses, claims and testimony from people. So it'd be something like, hey, they went to court and this happened. And as a result of that, Eileen says, you always make sure to put the qualifier in there, says blah, 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 blah. The reader conflates those things and thinks the whole statement is fact. And they start parroting Eileen said, they start saying, hey, that's fact. And I mean, it's a deceptive tactic. It's a mainstream media tactic. And she always keeps herself one step removed from any actual responsibility for claims. Ironically, as she's giving me a hard time for supposedly defaming her by claiming that we had more on her than we ended up having, she keeps herself legally away from any sort of responsibility by taking it's just lazy. It's not investigative journalism. She takes documented claims, stuff anybody who can do a decent Google search could figure out eventually, those claims. Then she takes what people say, like Eileen Gray or whoever, so-and-so says this, so-and-so says that, so-and-so says that, combines them to create the narrative she wants, but is very, very careful to keep those qualifiers in there so that if somebody comes back and says that was a lie, I'm going to sue you for telling a lie, for libeling, she can simply say, Eileen Gray said that. So any of the witnesses that she supposedly cares about, they're on the hook. An actual investigative journalist would try to figure out what was true. They would actually try to come to some conclusions. They would actually investigate. They would publish things that they could verify were true, not just what so-and-so says plus the easy stuff, which is what she does. And technically speaking, she's not telling a lie. Because again, like if I'm the reporter here, if I'm the writer here, and I have a witness that says that, ABC happened, and I report the witness said ABC happened, I'm not lying. They did say that. Now, whether it's true or not is now on them. Not my problem. This is what she does. Read her work carefully. You will notice this pattern all the time. Yeah, Ian, I thought about that. Ian, I almost wrote the article today in a in like a Julie Roy's fashion, but like we'll see what we can do. I mean, I think that would really, maybe that would help prove the point. I mean, it works very, very well for the Babylon Bee to use satire and humor to prove these points. One of the other things she does, she explains details of legal processes in like a generic, unspecific way to let her readers, who are, they're not necessarily journalists or cops or whatever, figure that out on their own or assume things. Like she wrote in the Gray's article, she said something like, that 2 pastors were written up by police. I don't know if you guys remember this. They were written up by police. Well, that doesn't mean anything, actually. That doesn't even mean you were charged with anything necessarily. Certainly doesn't mean you're guilty of something. But you just say they were written up, and people read, "Oh, pastor was written up by police." They assume guilt. You just let them assume that. You let the reader fill in the blanks. And by the way, these are sinful things to do. These are and things that she is unrepentant about. She's happy to characterize things this way for the sake of letting people believe lies, which I find it offensive. And she would say, "Well, David, you're not a journalist. You didn't go to journalism school." Yeah, but I know a lie is a lie. I know how people in the media craft things to prefer a narrative over another. In some cases, it's just choosing what facts to have and what facts to not have in your story. When you don't report things that are relevant to the narrative, you skew the narrative, you shift the narrative. And she's not like the best I've ever seen, but she's pretty good at it. Shifting that narrative to get people to go where she wants them to go. An example of this, in the Gray article, she talks about some friends of the church going to visit Eileen Gray, folks that like babysit their kids and all this. And she literally writes, well, the husband and wife entered her home at 10:15 p.m. Now, if you just take that sentence as it sounds, well, they entered her home. Well, that's not the way you say it if they were invited over. That's not the way you say it even if they came over and knocked on the door and then were invited in. That's how you say it if they broke a window and climbed in the dark of night. That's purposeful. She wants to characterize it that way. She wants you to see these people as bad guys and see Eileen as the good guy. And it's so slimy. Like the accurate thing would be to say, and I'm not sure if this couple, for crying out loud, it was so long ago. I don't know if this couple was invited over or not, but either way, if they have a relationship with her and they babysat the kids already, even if they came over unannounced and knocked on the door, Eileen would have let them in. It's just so slimy to say it that way and say, well, they entered the home. She crafted that sentence that way to make her readers have an emotional response that this couple were bad actors. And it's so slimy, for all the stuff. Yeah, it's totally Weasley. You're absolutely right. For all the stuff she wants to think that I've done, because we teased that we had more information. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen, this is more information and I'm not done. This is a list. This is a list of the unrepentant sins of Julie Roys and her supposed journalism. So, if you want to look at it that way, I'm trying to deliver on that promise. My idea was not to defame this woman at all. My idea is to expose what she's doing, and I'm not even halfway through. So, beyond the David Gray article, because there are other articles, other cases that she's been working on and trying to lay blame at the feet of John MacArthur and Grace Community Church. Perhaps the most egregious thing I think for me is how much false doctrine she subscribes to. That's a sin, by the way. Believing false doctrine is an egregious sin. It's worse than this journalism stuff, honestly. So, yeah, I see. Standard of Truth say she got platform. Yeah, that was really what caused the whole kerfuffle at the very beginning, was because I put in the article that, hey, there are guys like Ruslan KD and Seiko Woods who just unquestioningly had this woman on their platforms. Like, why would they do that unless they wanted to smear John MacArthur, or unless they read the article so uncritically they couldn't figure out what it was? Either way, it takes a certain amount of suspension of disbelief to try to think that it's even possible that a 53 year old ministry is somehow this hidden haven of abuse support. one of Allegretti case that Julie Royce talks about, she expects us all to believe that Grace elders just like heard this guy admit to abusing kids and just let him go for 2 years. And then 2 years later decide, oh, now we're going to take him to the cops. Like that doesn't even make any sense, and that makes as much sense as thinking that Grace Community Church, where they fire you on the spot for the slightest immorality, the slightest violation of something like this, they'll fire you on the spot. It's a very serious morality culture at that church that somehow they're cool with people being elders and abusing children and they don't take that seriously. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And so yeah, you're right. These guys start to platform. No, Viola, Julie is not threatening a lawsuit. She would fail miserably if she did. There's a pretty high bar for defamation, and certainly one of the components of that. For the record, I'm not a lawyer, but I'll just tell you while we're on here. One of the components of that for defamation like this is it needs to be demonstrated that I knew it was false when I said it. And I have the receipts to demonstrate that I thought it was true. So, and maybe that's me being dumb, but I was not defaming anybody. That's just her getting hysterical. And frankly, it's funny that she would want to respond that I'm defaming her on the podcast. And I've yet to get a substantive rebuttal to anything I've written so far. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for a response to the case we've laid out against her for this sinful way of doing journalism that she's engaged in. I've yet to see it. And I'm not hard to get a hold of, as you all know. But anyway, back to her false doctrine. You'll notice this, and this is something I want to see very carefully. For those of you she hasn't blocked on social media, and I don't know, probably all of us here, maybe she's already blocked. I have no idea. You'll notice this pattern. She posts something. Notice the people that like it and share it and comment, and the people that don't. It's leftists, it's atheists, it's women preachers, it's people that do not believe, they do not have faith and trust in the same God that we do. That's important. That should tell us something. Association in that way matters. She referred to in that sermon, I guess we could call it that we were talking about last week, that, clearly she watched me talk about her stuff, right? If she got all the way to the end of my video to know that I had defamed her, she watched the whole thing. I didn't hear a single theological rebuttal at all. Just, you're anti-journalistic by teasing this thing that ended up being false. I didn't hear a single rebuttal of the theology. I shouldn't be surprised, I suppose. But she said in that video she considers Roman Catholics to be brothers and sisters in Christ. So the woman has a false soteriology, a false understanding of justification. She thinks that somebody can have faith in their own works and be saved. I don't think the case doesn't get more cut and dry than that she's a lost person. You don't get to trust your own works for salvation and go to heaven. And that's a sad thing for me to say. I don't want that to be the case. But we all saw it with our own eyes. You can go back to the video on the 30th and see it with your own eyes if you really want to torture yourself. This was the first one I had. I don't remember which article it was, but the first line of the article, I said, surprise, surprise, Julie lies. And what was I referring to? I was referring to Julie Royce saying that she is, quote, as conservative as they come. That she was a conservative. By no theological definition, by no stretch of the imagination, is Julie Royce a conservative. You think that Catholics are saved? You think that the Bible doesn't teach what it teaches about women not being allowed to preach in the church? You go to an Anglican church where the priest, when they're administering the sacraments, is they stand in for Jesus. That's not conservative. So, it is a lie. It's a lie to get actual theological conservatives to let their guard down and take this woman seriously. You know, that's, I mean, I think I'm laying out the case pretty clearly for everybody who's willing to actually take these issues seriously. Now back to the journalism for a second. She likes to use what I like to call third-party obfuscation. And I want to give you an example of this. In the Eileen and David Gray article, she makes the claim that that both parties recorded the counselings. And I don't know if that's true. Eileen says it's true. Without the recordings, we don't know that they were recorded, right? I mean, this is just something and then after that, after saying, hey, both parties recorded the counselings, then Eileen makes all sorts of claims about what happened during the counselings. And because we just heard that they were recorded, we assume there's no way Eileen would say this if the recordings exist. And yet nobody's got those recordings. I've not seen them. I haven't seen anybody from Grace Community Church say they have them. And yet, because she obfuscates, she combines this idea that the recordings were done, they existed at some point. And that piece of information plus Eileen saying things about the counselings leads readers to think, oh, anything Eileen says about the counselings must be true. That's a problem. That's a fallacy. I might call it the we have the receipts fallacy. You know, I have the evidence of this, and so I'm going to say a bunch of stuff about it, but never present the evidence. That's a problem. This is maybe one of the worst things. This was the thing that got everybody confused. And really, she did this little twisteroo in the headlines of the articles. She uses actions and attributes and information discovered at one point in time and uses them to smear people in the past. So it'd be something like when she said that the Grace Community Church supported a convicted child abuser and pedophile. Never mind the fact that the revelation that the guy was doing these things came much later. She says, well, he was a pedophile. The discovery of his pedophilia was over here, and therefore he's a pedophile and he was doing these things. They supported him here, therefore they supported a pedophile. Which, of course, leads the reader to believe that everybody knew he was a pedophile. You know, so it's like smearing. It's like Back to the Future smear techniques. We're gonna figure out what happened in the future and then use that to judge what people knew in the past. It's ridiculous. You know, it's a purposeful muddling of the timeline to create a false impression of what people knew and when they knew it. It's purposeful to create confusion. It's purposeful to let the reader reach false conclusions. It's dirty. It's dirty. And it's disgusting. And it's not something, by the way, that we do at Protestia. It's not. She also allows witness statements to enter the record with no critical analysis. Like my favorite example of this, and this was one of the most recent articles, we're supposed to believe that a dad went to John MacArthur. His name is John Tucker. Goes to John MacArthur. This is the David Goy case. That John Tucker brings accusations to before John MacArthur about his daughter's friend being abused, and his daughter's friend, by the way, has his daughter over for sleepovers. He brings us to John MacArthur, and supposedly John MacArthur is like, yeah, we'll just take care of it internally. Like, name me one dad that would ever know that his daughter was having sleepovers with a girl who was being sexually abused by her dad, and just be like, it's cool. John MacArthur said he'll handle it. I'm just fine. Like, who believes that? I mean, that's not possible. And yet we're supposed to just take this. Julie publishes this witness testimony totally uncritically, like things that don't even pass the smell test. I don't know a single dad that would be like, a single dad that would say, yeah, I just found out that my daughter, my daughter's friend, who they do sleepovers together, I found out that her dad is abusing her sexually and like hovering over her while they're having sleepovers and stuff. I'm going to bring this to a church pastor. The church pastor is going to say, you don't need to go to the cops. I'll just handle it myself. There's not a single dad on the planet that would put up with that. And yet Julie just publishes this like it's like that's totally possible. No critical analysis whatsoever. And yet has the gall to say, I'm an investigative journalist. No, you're not. You didn't do any investigation. You didn't even do the basic, like logical math on this. And yet this is being used to smear John MacArthur. I mean, come on. It's just, it's beyond the scope of belief. She also likes to, and this was, I don't remember if this is the same article or not, but she likes to combine unclear statements with clear ones. This was actually the Al Allegretti case that she talked about, where she claimed that the Grace Community Church like covered up for a pedophile for 2 years. So she takes this article, and by the way, she never gets a statement from Grace Community Church because they won't talk to her. And why would they? You're going to go dig up something that's 40 years old and start slinging allegations against us right now? I wouldn't talk to you either. You know, and she likes to put that out there like that's some sort of evidence of their guilt. You know, which of course constitutionally we know is not the case. Common law would indicate that's not the case. Staying silent is not evidence of guilt. It's in the case of Grace Community Church, it's evidence that they know you have bad motives. They know that you don't have a motivation to actually get to the truth. You have a motivation to attack them. I wouldn't talk to you either. But anyway, so in the Allegretti case, she goes to a New York Times article that's not talking about the case per se. It's talking about the difficulty of clergy handling penitent admissions of guilt of crimes. And it says just sort of generically, Al Allegretti confessed to some of his crimes to Richard Hines in 1982. Doesn't say what crimes, just says crimes. Then later it turns out in the article, and this goes forward in time, that Al Allegretti's, the nature of his crimes came to light. And so she combines those things of, well, he confessed to some of his crimes and assumes what those crimes were. Now, Richard Hines himself said, in a statement that I have that Al Allegretti just confessed to general sexual immorality. You'll see this in my article that talks about this. That's a troublesome statement. I mean, that's the first line of Royce's article, and I would argue that is significantly more defamatory than anything that I said on my video last week. Significantly. I would be worried I'm not really worried for her particularly, but if I was her, I would be concerned that the church and the ministry that just won against the state of California and the county of Los Angeles, city and county of Los Angeles for $800,000. I would hope that they don't get a wild hair and decide to legally defend their name, because I think they have every biblical right to do so. You know, the Bible talks about not suing fellow believers. This is not such a case. You know, and I would argue that first sentence that they put in there, that assumption, and they would probably hide behind the LA Times said this is what's going on, so we assumed from that, and they might get away with it. But it was really, that was a horrible thing to say, and it was directly contradicted by Richard Hines, who wisely would not talk to Julie Royce. Now, lastly, and I don't want to, we're kind of getting the end of my time with you on this. I appreciate you guys hanging out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's not a Christian. They could sue her biblically. I wouldn't have any problem with that at all. Excuse me. I didn't have a problem when Mike Stone was going to sue Russell Moore. I don't think Russell Moore's a believer. That wouldn't have been a problem. Mike Stone pulled his punches. I think we had a podcast, or I had a intelligence briefing on that or something a little while ago. But yeah, I think they're perfectly within their rights to seek justice if they desire, if they think that that's what they want to do. So lastly, when it came to everybody's attention, and I don't know if Dear Woke Christian is still on the line here, but he's done just a terrific job of dissecting Julie Royce's book, Redeeming the Feminist Soul, or whatever it was called, from 2017, and really going beyond the scandalous admissions about her emotional affair with Sarah, in getting more into some of the theology that's being taught in that book, including the theology of the body nonsense we talked about last week. I don't know if we ever discussed this on the podcast, but she released a statement after all of this was kind of getting out there, and abuse, abuse informed or abuse, kind of advocates and things like that were like, what is up with this, Julie? You realize this is abusive, right? She finally had to come out with a statement. The statement, some of you may have seen, says, my 2017 book, Redeeming the Feminine Soul, I relay a story that emerged from what I remember as one of the most painful times of my life. I'm not going to read the whole statement here. I don't think we need to do that, but I found it very interesting, that she didn't frame any of what she did as a sin. And if you notice that reading the statement, none of this was a sin. This was all categorized as, well, I failed. It was a failure. I had missteps. It was wrong for me to communicate it the way I did. Wrong for me to frame it the way I did. It was, and then of course she turns around and casts herself as the victim. Well, it was one of the most painful times of my life, and it was my own issues. I didn't own it more fully. It was very much a political cover statement. I mean, how would a Christian not be able to look back at her own story, assuming she was telling the truth, which if she wasn't, that's its own lie, or its own sin, I mean. How would she not be able to look back at this and say, this was a sin. I was in sin. But no, she just she excuses her way out of it. She characterizes it, well, it's just, I just didn't tell the story right. And so, this is when even the abuse survivor advocates and things are looking at this. What do you mean you just didn't tell the story right? She talked, well, I pulled my book from my website and Facebook page. So that's not really what we're talking about. That's actually kind of hiding things, Ugh. But yeah, so I think I've probably exhausted this, honestly. I think I've exhausted all of these unrepentant sins of Julie Roy's. Again, I freely admit that I should have been more careful about not teasing a story before we fully had that information in hand. I think you'll see if you go to Protesti and read my op-ed about this, what happened with all of it. I'm not going to try to claim some sort of a victim status that I was lied to and manipulated, even though all that's true. And really we were lied to and manipulated, but we didn't fall for it. That's important. I hope that, that can be part of the story as well, because it's a little embarrassing for sure. And going back and looking through it, now it's like, oh yeah, okay, there was a sign here I probably should have picked up on. It's difficult. Journalism is not my full-time job. This is ministry work that I do in extra time. That being the case, it's important, and I want to be faithful. And when we make a mistake, I want to own it and tell you about it. And it's certainly not the breaking story that I thought I would be releasing today. So yeah, I'll hang out with you a few more minutes. If anybody's got any questions or anything, or anything that hasn't been made clear, I'm going to try to read through the chat here and see. Yeah, that's a good question. How could she write it and not think it was a sin? I don't know. That I don't know. I think if you read the book, it's hard to come to the conclusion that she didn't think it was sinful, but I did find it interesting that she wasn't the one that she didn't repent of this behavior. It was taken from her, right? Sarah left. If what we read can be believed, if what we read can be believed, then it was Sarah that ended the relationship, not Julie. Julie would have kept pursuing from every indication we have from that book. That's problematic to me. Any apologies from the people who recommended her book? I don't know. I know Kay Arthur, who wrote the foreword, is in her 80s. I don't know how active she is on the internet. I have no idea. So Standard Truth Podcast is saying, I read the book. Not one time did she say it was sin. That's troubling. That's troubling because that's when we don't say sin is sin. And I'm going to say, I mean, while we're being candid here, I'm going to say, that, you know, me basically insinuating I had information I didn't have was sinful. I should have waited, and I apologize, and I own that, and, will repent of that behavior. You're not going to see that again from me. Because that's what, you know, I mean, I like to say that that's what Christians do, you know, and we learn. I mean, none of us are perfect. We're all working through it. We're all still, working, and being worked on primarily by the Spirit in our sanctification. I'm no different than anybody else as far as that goes. And being humbled in that way is a good thing. God uses that, you know. You were still, well, you're still the polemics pope. Well, I hope that's not the case. I mean, I hope that we're all working, you know, together and sojourning together, shoulder to shoulder as much as we can. But I appreciate, I mean, really, that's what mortified me the most probably about telling this story today was, the trust that you guys have put in this ministry, and really the trust that JD has put in me and the guys have put in me, and other folks that rely on us even behind the scenes to do some of this work, feeling like I may have let them down a little bit. And, you know, still at the same time, I'm, you know, thanking the Lord that I had that he gave me the wherewithal to spy this out and to put out some bait there and expose the lie that this ended up being. Part of me feels like I should have put the name of this person in the article, if only to warn other people. But being that she's young and being that I think she's got some real serious issues, I didn't believe that was the right way to do that. I've communicated to her, just so you know, I've communicated to her privately saying, this was what I left your name out of this, and I'm praying you're going to get some help. You're going to get the help you need. Cause I think there's a lot more going on there than I know about. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's, for someone like me that can be a bit of a know-it-all, certainly admitting that I've gotten something wrong is difficult, you know, and I'm convinced that that's why God makes me do it from time to time. It's like, you need a lesson right here. See any other questions going on? Sorry guys, this is, for those of you listening to the audio replay of this later, this is compelling content here. Yeah, Sandra's saying narcissistic predators often blame anyone they can. Yeah, it seemed like maybe there was just a tendency to need attention. And I find myself not wanting to dunk on this person. And yet I believed I owed everybody an explanation for, and the funny thing is, I mean, you know, I don't have a lot of Twitter followers, not a lot of people that saw this happen there. You know, even the official Protestia account doesn't have a lot, and yet we want to be honest. You know, I mean, the most important presence in what we're doing is God, and I said this multiple times when I was having this conversation with this person. The few times we talked on the phone, I said the important thing to me is, you know, knowing that God is right here. You know, so it doesn't matter how clever we are at the way we characterize things or what we try to hide and not hide. God knows the condition of our hearts, and that gives me comfort, because I can say with complete honesty, my heart was not to hurt Julie Roys. My heart was not to, my heart with this article is not to hurt this person. It's to get the truth out there, and hopefully, and have said this before, hopefully if we can expose misdeeds, that's one thing that we do, but hopefully get down to the doctrine, get down to the teaching, get down to where we can talk about, this is a false doctrine that motivates this bad behavior. This is a false doctrine that motivates this sin. This is what the Bible teaches, and this is what this person is saying instead. We want to talk about that. And so, I think I have to be more careful in the future, not getting bogged down in the weeds over this kind of stuff, and understanding that vengeance is the Lord's, and he'll do that in his timing. And I think I alluded to this when we had to kind of pull this back and wait to, when we got suspicious, basically, that the God will do this in his timing. Thank you all for staying with me for now about an hour 20 or something on this freeloader side of the live stream. For those of you that are patrons, there's a link in Patreon below that to the unlisted patron stream, where I will keep going for just a little bit more. I will go look at Patreon to see if there are any sincere questions to be answered. Perhaps give you a few more details about how some of the stuff went down on the patron side. Thank you all for still supporting us, supporting this ministry. Thank you for your prayers and your grace and your understanding. And by the way, I'm certainly open if anybody has more questions or clarification they need about what happened. Please contact me any number of the ways you can get a hold of me. You can the easiest way right now, honestly, is DM me on Twitter. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, you message me on Facebook. More than open to, and while I'm on that subject, I had at the beginning of the Bible study a couple kind of criticisms and rebukes about like I should have done something differently, and that's awesome. I really appreciate that. We're all still learning and sojourning together, and that's exactly what we need to do for each other. To critique and rebuke where we need to, and grant forgiveness where we need to, and keep trying to tell the truth. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you again for hanging out with me. Stay tuned for the patron portion right after this. At that next link, I'm going to flip over to it about as fast as I can. So thanks again. God bless. And as always, Semper Reformanda.